Sam is now a Super Bowl champion, and not a lot of people believed that was going to happen. Sam did, and he is now joining us live. Let's go back to USC. I remember your freshman year, and Sark probably didn't tell you this. I remember him telling me this. He said, that kid is like a linebacker that plays quarterback. He's tough. He doesn't care. He's not caught up in all the wrong stuff. What do you remember? Let's go to the beginning of your journey at USC. You were not the five-star guy. You were not the guy that everybody on campus was talking about. Do you remember that first, that indoctrination into college football at USC?
Yeah, I do. And I remember, a lot of people kind of questioning, why I was staying. And because I know I wanted to play basketball my senior year. And I know a lot of people were questioning me that way. And then the other kid that I was going to be coming in with, as a freshman, I knew that he was going in the spring. So everyone was like, oh, he's going to have a leg up on you and whatnot. But I knew that we also had Cody Kessler, who was starting for us as a redshirt senior. And I knew that I would have time to learn the system and learn how to play quarterback in that system and under Sark and under Coach Helton as well. So, I think just wanting to play other sports and then coming in, understanding and being confident in myself to be able to get the job done, I think has always been something I've always had, even when I was in high school going into college.
I remember when you were struggling with the Jets, and I had talked to a GM who also believed in you, and he said, listen, he's 20 years old. The Jets don't have a great infrastructure. Like, this is hard. And, I remember this GM saying, Peyton Manning's rare. Number one pick, goes to a team, gets support. And it's like, but even Peyton Manning, year 4, led the league in picks. So he said, you media guys, he goes, you just think it's easy. It's really hard when you're young and it's New York City. Let's go back to the early New York days. You're having fun. It's new. You're a West Coast kid. You're 3,500 miles from home. Was there a moment in the first 2 years that you ever said, man, I don't know if I can play on Sundays. I'm good on Saturdays. Can I be a Sunday guy?
I'd be lying to you if I said that there wasn't any doubt in my mind. There was a little bit of doubt, throughout those tough times in New York, but I had great teammates. I had great coaches that believed in me in New York. And, that's what really kept me upright there. And again, I always talk about it, but my friends and my family that I have kind of built at home, also were able to keep me upright. And even, there were some times where, we won a few games in a row, being in New York and I had great teammates and great coaches that were along that journey as well. And perfect example is I was texting a former teammate of mine that I was in New York with today, even just talking about, some things, just personal things. So, it's those relationships that you kind of build along the way that keep you going, throughout those times in New York. And, I love, all the people, all the relationships that I built there, because if it weren't for those relationships, I don't know if I'd be the person or the player that I am today.
I've said this before on the air. If you go back to Carolina, your last 6 starts, you get to start again. You were sitting and watching for, benched. They brought you back last 6 games. You go 4-2. First time you'd ever kind of been benched. That's really where the journey starts. If you go back to November 27th with Carolina, from that moment until today, you're the winningest quarterback in the league. So at the end of Carolina, they say, okay, Sam, we're giving you the starting job again. And you played pretty darn well. Do you look at that and say to yourself, okay, confidence back, I'm ready to go? What did that matter to you?
100%. Yeah. And I think, a lot of it had to do, again, I feel like it's going to be a theme here for this interview, but like the coaches and players that I was with when I was there, Ben McAdoo being one of those great coaches that I was with in Carolina, just feeling like, it was that same kind of West Coast system where it was like, all right, I could, no matter what, if I was taking 7 in a hitch, I never felt like I had to throw it to a guy just because he was one in the progression. And, if he trips and falls, I feel like I can get to 2 and 3 and even my outlet to my running back really quickly. And, it was just that system. That's where I kind of fell in love with that West Coast kind of listen to your feet, listen to your progression kind of system. And, I really fell in love with it there, and it just made sense, especially, playing playing a coach like Todd Bowles in Tampa Bay. And that's because he's hiding shell. He's hiding, where guys are coming from, different pressures, bringing four to his side, trying to test your protections that way. It allowed me to play so much faster. That's where I really fell in love with that offense. And again, I have great coaches and great players that I played with in Carolina to thank for, not only my time in Carolina and the great times that we had, but also winning a few games there at the end and putting us in a chance to, potentially make the playoffs in a division that was kind of struggling that year.
So then you go, it's well chronicled. Then you go to San Francisco. You learn and sit back up Purdy. You go to Minnesota. You absolutely crush. That's well chronicled. And they decide, their decision is, we like you, but boy, do we want a better deal for us. And then you go to Seattle, and we'll get to Seattle in a second. But when you left Minnesota, was there even a tinge of like, what, you don't believe in me? I won 14 games. Like, I would have understood if you got on a flight to Seattle and thought, oh, I'm going to show those guys. How did you view Minnesota saying, we love you, here's the price, good luck in Seattle? How did that land for you?
Yeah, I think, being in, that being the end of my 7th season, I felt like I definitely haven't seen it all, but I've seen a lot in the NFL. And I understand kind of the process and what it takes to, I don't understand necessarily what it takes to run an entire organization and run a team, but I understand how difficult it can be. And, you have a lot of decisions that you have to make as a GM, as a head coach. And so for me personally, like obviously I believe in myself and I understand in my abilities, but at the same time, I understand, their thought process of, going with the younger kid and maybe, especially JJ. Like I think JJ is very talented. He's super smart. And there's a lot of potential there. And I think JJ is going to be a really, really good player in this league. And, that allowed them to kind of, not sign me to maybe a bigger deal and bring some veteran guys in. I think when I sat back and really, digested, I guess, the information that they didn't want me back, that was, a little bit of a tough pill to swallow. But when I really stood back and looked at it from afar, I really understood the decision, and I really did. And I'm thankful that I landed in Seattle.
So let's go to Seattle now. Next 7 minutes, let's talk Seattle. First practice or two with JSN. Nobody knew he was a number one. He's talented. We all watched him. He had about 60 catches his first year, and all of a sudden it's his second year. And all of a sudden now Sam Darnold, you got the second youngest team in the league, the Green Bay. You play JSN. Your first moment you realized, oh, wow, he is something else. How long did it take you?
Oh, man. Yeah, it was – so OTAs, he was always special, running around doing this thing. But, that early on in the process, as a receiver especially, you don't want to – you're going about 80, 85% most of the time. And I remember we came out to L.A. and did some throwing in the offseason with the guys right before training camp. And – I'd kind of seen him move around for the last couple months. And then, I had one of my other buddies that just came in through with us because I needed an extra arm. And he was like, dude, this guy is different. Like the way that he moves around and the way that he gets in and out of cuts, like he doesn't cut the way that I feel like you normally teach a receiver. He's very kind of rounded off, but he doesn't lose speed in and out of cuts.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of his specialties. And that's something as well that I kind of got to witness firsthand with Justin Jefferson. Like there's a lot of similarities there with kind of the way that they run routes. But JSN, I think another superpower that he has, he's a lot stronger than people think.
Yeah.
He's got a really strong lower body. And once he gets the ball in his hands, he can do a lot, with the ball in his hands, making guys miss and being more physical than DBs.
Sam, people said, well, Sam Darnold didn't do a ton in the Super Bowl. And I said, folks, Sam Darnold did what Brady did. 2 of Brady's Super Bowls, he threw for under 200 yards. I said, Sam didn't have a turnover in the playoffs in the superior NFC. Only Breeze, Aikman, you, and one other quarterback, I think Steve Young's ever done that. When you got to the Super Bowl, Did Mike McDonald, those 2 weeks of practice, did he just tell you, Sam, listen, we're going to win this game. We just got to make smart decisions. Did you have a different feel coming into the Super Bowl, or did the game work the way you thought it would?
It's just one of those things that, I mean, the head coach doesn't have to say anything to me about taking care of the football. That's very obvious. And I'm well aware of the defense that we have, how special that group is. But I think the higher the stakes, the more prevalent and the more important the ball is. And that's not to say it's not important during the regular season. But, I think, and at the same time, like, there were a lot of throws I'd like to have back in that Super Bowl. I missed a touchdown to Jax right before the halftime. I missed Cooper on a couple throws. Cooper made some incredible catches in that game. Just, having my back that way, like, there was a deep ball, or I guess early on I was scrambling out to my left, and Jax he would have been wide open for a touchdown, and I just kind of overthrew it a little bit. But so there are a few throws that I'd like to have back in that game. But I think going into that game and just going into, the latter half of the season, I knew that it would be very important to just take care of the football.
I remember a game when you were at USC, you went up to Washington and beat the Huskies, and you were really good. You were, I remember that game well. Tell people what it's like. Now you're back on the West Coast. You're in Seattle. They were the biggest USC rival. It was the Ducks and the Huskies. About playing in Seattle, what is it like?
Oh, man. Yeah, I remember that game very vividly. I think they were 2 or 3 in the country, maybe 4. Had studs all around. Dante Pez, John Ross, Jake Browning, had a ton of dudes on defense. Buda Baker, all those guys. The list goes on and on. But, just going into that stadium, it was electric, man. You had that purple cloud of dust, welcoming you as the Huskies jogged onto the field. And, it was that typical Seattle weather. Kind of later in the season, it was gray, a little chilly. But man, it was just fun to be able to play in an atmosphere like that. Like, that's what you dream of playing in games like that. And then to finally be in Seattle with the Hawks and just see the electric atmosphere that our crowd creates, not only, throughout the last half of the season, but even early on. Like, when we had 1 o'clock games earlier in the season, it was the same intensity that we had, in the playoffs. And so I just, those fans are incredible. And it is a little different in Seattle, the fandom that they have for their sports up here.
Yeah, they kind of feel forgotten. They feel geographically isolated, so they got a chip on their shoulder. They get lubricated in the pregame, and they let you hear it for the next 5 hours. Listen, we got to run. I'm so happy for you. I've been lucky enough to follow all this stuff and know you for years. Congratulations. You have a remarkable family, and I appreciate you giving me 15 minutes of time. You didn't have to, and I appreciate it.
Of course, Colin. I appreciate you, man.